Our guest speaker today is Terry Sveine, and he's here to talk about New Ulm grocery stores. Terry is well known in the community, and he is a wonderful historian. We work closely together on many things in the archives. He volunteers there. He also worked at the Chamber of Commerce for many years, and he has authored a book on the life of Francis Bazin. I think that this program actually stemmed from the Kitty Leave essay contest, did it not? We had an essay contest here maybe 10 years ago, and this is one of the topics that Terry chose to write about, and then it evolved into a slide presentation. So please welcome Terry Sveine.
Thank you, Darla. Professional speaker, bring your own water. So Darla hit on it a little bit, but I'll go in a little more detail. This started, I always like to say how things started. Lisa Besmer, some of you may know, she's been on the board of the Historic Society, asked me 2 years ago to do a talk for the Junior Pioneers. And you can see I forgot to change the date and everything. And the Junior Pioneers are a group that has to prove ancestry in and around New Ulm since 1870. And I said, you know, I could do a talk. I'm comfortable doing it. I've done them before for that group. But what am I going to talk about? And as Darla said, in 2004, I wrote the evolution and change of New Ulm's grocery stores for the Kitty Leave contest. Second place, $75. Professional speaker, yes. And I thought, you know, I could take this and turn it into what you're going to see. And I think it turned out pretty good. We did this for the JPs a year and a half ago. New Cat filmed it. Some of you may have seen it or part of this on TV already. A lot of people have said, oh, I really liked your story, but I only saw half of it on New Cat, our cable access group. So I hope some of you that were only seeing half are here today. So I got to thank some people. First of all, thanks Brown County Historic Society for allowing me to do this. Thank you, Darla, for helping me with the files. Whenever people called me up twice this week. What's the history of the house at 312 South Garden or German Street? Well, I don't know that. We've got a great museum. Well, I don't want to do the work. Could you do it for? No. We've got excellent resources here for any of you who have a historical thought. Don't forget to come in, Darla, or sometimes if some of us volunteers are there, we can do our best to help you, and we'll probably give you the right answer. My friend Elroy Ubel, some of you may know, Elroy's a pretty famous historian around town, gave me most of the pictures, not all, but most of the pictures. Elroy's book, some of you may know this one here. I call it the Brown County Historic Society in print form. He's got a great history of grocery stores in there that you could access as well. It's sold out. It's out of print, I should say, but it is available at the library. You don't have any left, do you? No, I don't think so. Yeah. So once word came out back in October, what have you, of 2 years ago, people calling me up almost daily for a while there. Oh, Terry, you're going to talk about groceries. Are you going to mention the grocery store? I said, well, yeah, I will a little bit. It's not really what it's about, but I'll mention it. Oh, you have to mention so-and-so. And I get all these calls about it because it really struck a nerve. I could be doing a history of athletic footwear in New Ulm, and there'd be two people out here. Two unusual people, I imagine. But everybody goes to a grocery store. So this has really struck a nerve with people. So what this is not going to be about is me showing you pictures of old grocery stores, which I could access a lot of pictures, and then elaborating for 3, 4, 5 minutes on each of them. It won't be that. You'll see pictures of several stores that'll strike a note with you, but this is more how did grocery shopping change in looking around all of our lifetimes. Barb, you and I might be the youngest here. Oh, Joe too. We're the younger ones in the group here. So, but yet we're old enough in our 60s to have seen the cusp of the change, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. So significant changes happened in our lifetime. I want you to keep that as a message here. So as part of the essay, I wrote a semi-fictional little story from my youth that I'm going to read to you. And whether you grew up in New Ulm or not is not so important, because you can relate this to the stores that you used to use when you were a young person. So, to set the stage for a glimpse into the past, I will try to portray the essential elements and the experience of shopping in the old grocery stores in this semi-fictional story from my youth. "Come on, kids, we're going to go for a walk," said the mother of 3 preschool-age children. "Can I pull the girls in the wagon, Mom?" said the 4-year-old little boy, who was proud to be the oldest and therefore his mother's best helper. Off they went on an early afternoon outing, shortly after having cleaned up the dinner table. They were walking because not only was it healthy exercise and helped burn off the kids' excess energy, but they were only going around the neighborhood anyway. And besides, the dad had taken the family's only car to get to his job. Is that already ringing a bell with people? You had one car? Yep. After dropping in to check on one of Mom's sick friends, they encountered another of her friends taking her own new baby out for a walk. Kids got a little antsy after the 2 ladies visited on the sidewalk too long, and soon the young family resumed their walk. If you know my mother, that is a very real thing. After half an hour at the playground at Washington Park, they were heading back home. As they got near to 3rd North and State Street, the kids smiled with recognition because they knew they were going to stop at Nunn's Grocery. Nunn's, as I said, 3rd North and State Street. It's a private home these days. There was always a sense of wonder in looking at the different packages in the store, and even to the kids, it was like visiting old friends when they went in there. In the back of their minds, they hoped they'd be getting a piece of candy before they left. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sweeney," said Charlie from behind the side counter. "Oh, I see we have some special visitors along with us today," he said, smiling as he winked at the young ones. The mom dug out her shopping list as she walked back to the meat counter and asked Art, "What can I make Georgie for supper tonight?" "Well, we got some nice pork chops that I just cut up that I think he would like. What else can I get you?" Mom said, "Put in a couple pounds of wieners with those chops while I look around for a few other things on my list." Meanwhile, the kids were kept busy staring at all of the candy in the glass counter right by the front door. Mom picked out some dish detergent, a tube of toothpaste, a few boxes of macaroni, a pound of flour, and a loaf of bread. "Charlie, do you have any apples?" said the mother. "You know, we just got some in yesterday and they look real good," said the always positive Charlie. "Put 5 or 6 of them in the bag along with these items," she said as she put her other dry goods on the side counter. Just then, Harry showed his head from the back room and with his big voice said, "Hi there, Sweeneys. Out for a walk on a nice day like this? How are those kids doing?" he said, looking at the little ones. My mom said we could have a treat if we were good today," said Karen, the second in age and the most bold. She's going to be here tonight. She's going to love this. "Well," and said Art, "here's a Tootsie Roll for all of you." As Charlie was packing the groceries into 2 paper bags, the mom asked if they could put these groceries on her tab and that she'd pay it on Friday. "No problem," said Art as he helped carry them out to the wagon on the sidewalk. "See you in a few days," he said, waving goodbye to everyone. "We like going to that store, Mom. Those men are so nice to us. When are we going back? And wasn't that what shopping used to be? But it ain't that way anymore." So, the first grocery store, and Darla, Darla saw this as a junior pioneer, and she said, "It wasn't a grocery store." Well, the first grocery store, the first store that sold groceries, was the Little Rock Trading Post. A man named Joseph Laframboise had it from 1834 till his death in 1856. It was about 10 miles upriver, up toward Fort Ridgely. And he built it primarily to trade with the Indians. Now, he carried other things. It wasn't a grocery store per se. You could probably buy all sorts of hunting gear and whatnot in there. But New Ulm was founded in 1854, so for the first 2 years, this was the only store in the neighborhood that could have supplied them with any groceries and such. So a year later, a man named I don't know his first name, F. Robecki, started a store in May of 1855 on the KC Road. The KC Road, most of you know, is kind of the extension of North Broadway if you went out that way. As the city grew and merged with the Turners in 1856, Mr. Schalk and Schramm opened what they called a complete store. And that's going to be a message we'll see for the next 50 years or so. There was rarely a pure grocery store. They sold groceries, but many other things. You'll see words like provisions and such being used too. So he had a complete store. The Turners came in 1856. So, should I test my German? From here, 717 feet in the direction of the arrow, on the 11th of November 1856, the New Ulm Turnverein was organized. And that is the close-up of that bigger picture. Mr. Willis Runk would live, here's the KC Road according to my pointer, and he would live right over there. So this is telling you, up along, that's the Minnesota River, is where the Turners landed. And that Schalk and Schramm store was out there. So, Mr. Cider and Caney in 1857 opened a grocery store. There's a story in the museum here, in the archives, that says they had inventoried the town in 1857. And it said there were 95 houses, 6 stores, 1 butcher shop, and 1 bakery. There were a few other things listed, but this is relevant to what we're talking about. So New Ulm had grown from October of 54 to 50. That's kind of fast growth, actually. One thing that will show up a lot in our talk, at least in the early part, will be the concept of the central business district or the downtown. That's where virtually everything was located for most of the time. There's one exception, the Nunn store that we saw. It started out as a Mr. Gady and then Mr. Durbin, and then he sold it to the Nunn Brothers. That happened in 1910. And so otherwise, everybody's downtown. So I don't have photos of the super early ones, but what I've got here are newspaper captures. And when I show these, it's going to fill the screen. Do not try and read everything on the screen, because I will point to where you should read, and I've got the stick here. So another thing to be alert to is there's no telephone numbers or addresses in these ads. And we'll talk about that as we elaborate. So in 1870, Mr. Pfefferly opens in town what was called the first exclusive grocery store in Brown County. And he called it the one-horse grocery store. He had a delivery service. Delivery services come and go throughout this whole story, but he had a delivery service where he used 1 horse and a wagon. So he called it the one-horse grocery store. So it sounds funny to us. I bet it sounded just as funny to them. That's probably his intention. Mr. Pfefferly in 1878, hey, back there. There we go. Opens his store here. He has groceries and provisions. That's the thing. And I think if you're saying you've got canned, dried, and green fruit, probably was a treat to have that. Or why, if it was so commonplace, I don't know that you'd make mention of it. It probably means to me he either got a big load of that stuff in, or he's one kind of specializing in that. So also in 1878 is the Kiesling and Keller folks. Look at this though. This stood out to me. There's 4 families feeding off of this grocery store. Remember Wilford Brothers hardware store, many of you? There were 2 sets of cousins, 4 guys making a living off of a store. You got to be a pretty big, prosperous store if you're going to feed 4 families off of it. Kiesling had dry goods, groceries, boots and shoes. Who would go into a grocery store today thinking you're going to buy a pair of boots in there too? It was a different type of thing. It wasn't a pure grocery store. So looking here, Mr. Newman and Roskopf had dry goods. Newman and Roskopf had dry goods, caps, everything, then groceries. So you get the theme that groceries are part of the whole mix. It's not a pure grocery store. I like this one. Mr. Waring had a grocery store where? In Little Golden Gate. Remember Golden Gate? It's in the northwest. Those of you that don't know, it's a defunct city in the northwest part of Brown County. But they were small enough, or large enough, I guess, to at least support a grocery store. And then Jacob Nix. Jacob Nix was the leader of the first battle of New Ulm. He was a butcher. He had a shop right across from the museum on what is today where the new bank is. And he called it the Custer Meat Market. I don't know why he called it that, other than I'm thinking perhaps Custer's Last Stand. This ad was ran in 1881. Custer's Last Stand was 1876. It would have been a big famous thing, Custer's Last Stand, so maybe he chose that name to have some built-in publicity. In 1888, Messrs. Briston, Graft, and Friedman have ads here. Friedman, Briston, Graft. At least they tell you what town it's in. These guys don't even say where they are, although they're advertising in a New Ulm paper, so that's probably pretty likely. But that speaks to how small the town was. If you went downtown, you're going to find these stores. You didn't need an address. We'll talk about addresses in a moment here, but that's kind of funny to us today, isn't it? You pretty darn well better put your address on something if you're advertising it. Mr. Crony, there we go. I am back here again. This one I wanted to point out, Mr. Gratz. He has a provision and grocery store, but look where he is. He's outside of downtown. Not by much, but he's still outside of downtown. He is at the corner of the Congregational Church at 3rd South and Minnesota Street. It's not downtown, it's close, but it tells you that the town is growing. And that's very much the truth. Between 1890 and 1900, New Ulm grew a lot. Percentage-wise, well, I'm not the greatest math guy, but they doubled by 2,000 people. Mr. Briston Graft again. Is that what I want on this one? Sorry, folks, I should be better than that. Oh, I'm just looking again here. Dry goods and groceries, kind of hitting the same thing. Clothing, gents furnishings, dry goods, then groceries. So I may be beating that point to death, but you're getting the fact. We're going to see some pictures later on which will prove this point, that it carried a little bit of everything. So there's two names in New Ulm retail that if you're from town you probably know. If not, trust me, these were big names. The Donahue family. The Donahue family had a store on First South and Minnesota Street till a fire in 1970 or thereabouts. And the Crony family, Cronies were big for years. Today, if you walk by our old Herberger store, there's a historic plaque on there. It talks about the Crony family store in there. So those are big names that came on in 1892 already. Here's Henry Crony's store. It also, just as a side note, I've noticed this. Ora Strickler was a doctor in New Ulm around the turn of the last century. And he was involved in a lot. You would have known Ora Strickler in those days. But look at the door. Most all of us remember the doctors were up on top of before the clinic started at the bottom of the Center Street Hill. You went up to the top to go to the doctors. Dr. Fazemeyer across the street was kind of an exception. But if you're going to a doctor, presumably you're sick and you got to climb some pretty dang steep stairs to get up there. Dennis, everybody was upstairs, which seems ironic. I don't think anybody would have had an elevator in those days. Here's a mention, the first mention I find of Frank Benke. Frank Benke's name you may not know. He's a player in the grocer business for a long time. And he did pretty well because that's his house. We've all seen that on 3rd South and Broadway. That was built with grocery money. So if you did it right, it paid. It went on, he sold it to a Mr. Silverson, who was the head of the roller mill. And so you could imagine him having money, but I didn't think grocery money was that good, but apparently it was. The Leonhardt Brothers, don't read this whole thing, but what stood out to me in 1898 was that you could buy coconuts in New Ulm. When I saw it, what the heck? Shut up! We can get coconuts in New Ulm in the late 1800s. I would never have guessed that. The Red Front grocery store, owned by George Hounstein. His brother had the brewery. And the Ottomeyer building, I see some of my old chamber volunteers are in here. This was the Ottomeyer building is today's chamber building. But what I want to point out to you is we've got our own Red Front brand creamery in those neat little jars. And that tells me something, that business is so well established and so popular that they can put out their own brand name of things. And proving the point, the Martys had a grocery store in town, put out their own coffee. New Ulm Grocery Company, or the New Ulm Wholesale, some of you might remember it as, had their own line of spices. Kind of a funny sounding name for their Nugco. It just sounds weird to me. But look at that. I mean, we're in New Ulm, obviously, right? And Rosa Snowbrook had the city meat market on the corner of Center and Minnesota Street, and she put out her own brand of lard. I mean, if you're a butcher, you're clearly going to go through a lot of lard, so it made sense to do that. And that tells me those people were doing their business right. They were sharp business people. Mrs. Snowbrook was a very sharp business person. So, yes. When did they go into 1903, Richard Pfefferly has a grocery store. And he's doing something that enters the scene. This is the first time I saw this. The pure food grocer. And he's making a big deal out of being the pure food grocer. In the late 1800s and early 1900s was called the Progressive Era in America. And just before that was called the Gilded Age, where these monsterly rich people, the Vanderbilts and whatnot, came, the Rockefellers came, and were making a lot of money, but were kind of being abusive to society. And a man named Upton Sinclair wrote a book called The Jungle, you might know of. He wrote that in about 1902. And he exposes the Chicago meatpacking business. And it truly changed the country. The Pure Food and Drug Act is passed in 1906. And so people have become super conscious that this is a pure food grocer. That carried a lot of weight to be able to say that. We'll see a few other examples in a bit. What do I got red for? Oh, yes, of course. You should see how small my writing is, how bad my eyes are, and how big this is. This is the Red Front Grocery again. First time we got a telephone number. a telephone number. New Ulm Rural Telephone Company came on the scene in 1905, and this is 1905. It doesn't mean that everybody had a telephone right away, like anything. Crucial mass, they call it. You can put a product out, it takes until everybody gets on board before you're really making a statement. But they jumped on it right away. If you want to do business with us, you can call us. Now, I think the first year or two, there were like 45 people had telephones in New Ulm. So only 45 people could take action, but clearly he was marketing to them. This is a fun one. New Ulm Ice Company. They were pretty clever. We don't need to read all of it other than this here. We'll sell you a refrigerator at cost, depending on how big a unit you buy. That's like cell phone companies today. Yes, you can buy expensive cell phones that stand apart, but you can get a fairly functional and cheap cell phone for free. Because these companies they're not making money on the cell phone. They're making money on the service. And that's what these guys are doing. They're making money delivering ice to you every 2 weeks or month or whatever your frequency was. And probably not a month, it's not going to last that long. But that was pretty cool. Now, my wife is from a little town called Wells, south of Mankato. And there's no water around Wells. There's no river, there's no lake. You could go out of town a ways, but it's not practical. But we are lucky to be on the river, and so for us to get ice, having an ice company was normal. All right, Terry, why are you looking there? Oh, I thought this was cute. Hot weather groceries, picnic bargains. Why not? We think of that. Oh, they wouldn't do that then. Of course they would. They didn't have TVs to sit in front of all the time. You did so much more of your socializing outside. And I thought that was pretty clever too. This one, Mr. Yanka, I don't recognize that name, is telling you, we don't need to read all of that, but just this sentence here. I can't read it from where I'm at, but essentially he's saying, I studied under Frank Benke for 8 years. I know the grocery business. When I did this talk for the Junior Pioneers, Florian Dietrich was sitting right in front of me. And I said, it's like some modern person having worked for Flory for several years, spins off his own trucking business. And he would say, to give priority or a credential, I studied under Florian Dietrich, the master. Yanka's saying, I studied under Frank Benke. So when you study history, you realize there's hardly anything new. The way people react is all the same, and the way we promote things is all the same. This is a cool one. World War I was 1914 to 1918. The U.S. was in it only at 17 and 18. But this is the grocers, or most of them, banding together. So meatless, what has it got? Meatless Tuesdays, wheatless Mondays and Wednesdays, and porkless Saturdays. I've not heard of the porkless ones. But they're telling you, oh, there's different recipes you can use. They're telling you don't waste food. Food is at a premium due to the war effort. But this one speaks volumes. You'll see it in a few more. Cash and carry. What they're saying is, we've let you guys charge an awful lot of stuff during the wartime. And you got to start paying your bills. There's some businesses, I'll tell you a story as we move on, but there was one business that almost folded because he carried too much credit. So, I like Mr. Pfefferly is going out of business. Did he have any takers for 4,000 pounds of coffee? You could probably buy smaller amounts, but the fact that he had 4,000 pounds of coffee, that had to be a lot. We had, in 1919, a year after the war, logically, we had an Army surplus store. And it was, they carried all kinds of things. I don't know how I feel about buying Army surplus bacon or groceries, but you know, they had it. You see Mr. Beerbaum, huge name in the grocery business. Leo Berg Sr., Leo's dad, that's the first ad for his business. Red Front Grocery, the cash store. We could read that whole thing where they're basically saying, we're going to shut off credit. In fact, you guys got to pay your bill, and as of the 1st of April, we'll only accept cash, no more credit. Remember when credit cards started getting popular, where most everybody had one? Would that be maybe the 1980s? You had them before, but most people not till then. You'd see stores that were offering a 3% discount if you paid cash instead of using your credit card. Because what most people don't realize, and I bet there's a ton of young people who use credit cards like cash, that the merchant accepting that credit card has to pay a fee. Generally it's 3%. And so we saw, in our time, we saw stores offering discounts. If you paid cash for your gas, it's this price. If you use your credit card, it's that. Then the ones that didn't know are saying, oh, look, how come you're charging me more? Well, yeah, dumbbell. Neat little, it's a circus parade downtown, Red Front Grocery. So this is Center and Minnesota streets. That has been this building, it's now the Thimblebox sewing shop again. Not again, but it's been something different. And this one I like, the Purity Grocery. Look at what they're doing. They're just out and out calling themselves that to get people's mindset. I don't know Mr. Sandmans or Wachter. They're using their telephone, but it's the first ad I saw, and it comes from 1920, where there's an address. The problem is, this is in the New Ulm paper, there's no Main Street in New Ulm.
There is. We either called it Main Street or Minnesota.
They probably, when they submitted their ad copy, put MN for Minnesota, and the people putting the ad together, oh, MN must mean Maine or something like that. I don't know. But wrong address. They use an address, but the wrong one. So addresses came about in 1902. Prior to that, by the post office, nationally. The federal post office said, we will, instead of you coming to the post office, which is what everybody did everywhere, and picking up your mail, we will bring mail to you. It's a big, huge change, as you can imagine. But nobody had addresses on their houses or businesses. So, but you've got to have addresses on your buildings. And so it took, at least that I could find, till 1920 for an ad to put its specific street address on there. And then they get it wrong. Oh well. We had co-op. This is in 1922. Co-ops have come and gone throughout New Ulm's time. We talked in the very early how, like, the Turners had a cooperative store for their members. And co-ops have come and gone. We now have one again, as you know, just on the next block on First North between Minnesota and Broadway. They come and go, but they don't tend to last long, and I don't really get that. My wife and I patronize our co-op, but I don't know, I hope it lasts a very long time. And the last ad is also from 1922. Grudner's Purity Grocery. But what I'm pointing out here is the national brands have arrived now. Heinz, they talk about Van Camps and Armours. So national brands are taking over from everything being local or statewide in any case. So New Ulm grows a lot, as I told you, in especially 1890 to 1900, 1900 to 1910. And we grew an awful lot. If we lived on, I'll say Wells, Minnesota, for example, on a prairie town, you would grow concentrically, like that. You'd always be about the same distance from the center. But that's not New Ulm's geography. We're in the river valley. When New Ulm starts growing, it can't grow like that. It grows laterally. So if you're now living on the north end and south end of town, you're kind of a ways away from the middle. There's kind of a myth out there that everybody had horses in the old days. Very few urban people had horses. You didn't need them. If you own a horse, if I own a horse in my yard, I'd have to feed him and water him every day. I'd have to clean up after him. I'd have to take him out, ideally, if I'm a good animal owner, I'd take him out for some exercise. And I'd need to build a barn to house him. Why would I do that? I live in a small town. I can walk most anywhere. I don't need that. If you did need a horse, you'd go to a livery stable. We had all kinds of livery stables. Livery stables were, by modern analogy, a car rental company. If you wanted to go visit your sister in Mankato, go to the livery stable, rent a horse and a wagon, and off you go. Looking at tax records, there were very few people who owned horses in town. They didn't need them. But we've created an issue. We're growing, and so now people are on the end. Most people were going grocery shopping every day. Perhaps not Sunday, most stores weren't open. But virtually every day you're going grocery shopping. If you've got a lot of kids, which people did have, and you got to go shopping every day, and it's a 2-mile walk, you're going to get sick of that in a hurry. And so what happened? What happened is the rise of neighborhood grocery stores. Neighborhood grocery stores were a big change. It was nobody passed a law and all of that, but it just, entrepreneurs saw, hey, if I put my store where the customers are, instead of making the customers have a hassle to get to me, I'll do better business. And so we started seeing neighborhood grocery stores grow in a big way. They offered friendly relations. If you're going to the store every day, or virtually, you're going to get to know your grocer. Casual charging. You could, as I read in my little fictional story, but it's very true. I remember Mom always put that on my tab. The individualized help. You did not walk around. These are not full service or self-service stores. You're going to the grocer, giving them your list, and they get it off the shelf with the grabber. You wondered, what the heck is he doing with this crazy thing here? This is my demo. So stores were tall. Stores were tall. I live at 904 North Minnesota. On my block, there were 2 neighborhood grocery stores. One was in the home of my friend and former neighbor George Reisler back in the corner. George, part of your house was a grocery store done out of the home. And then 3 houses north of me, and where Luann Scharbach lives now, was also one. So you'll see some of these pictures. How do you make a living selling out of the front part of your house? I don't know, but they did, and they did it for many years. You had limited selection. When you went in, say, here's what I need, here's my list, you got the cornflakes. Here you go, be happy. Well, that's not the case now. We'll see later what modern cornflakes are like. It's a big deal. The stores were tall. The stores were stacked high, as opposed to a modern store. You had the grabbers. You had those neat little wheeled ladders. I've never seen one live. Actually, at Pink's or Raftus used to have them. But you would wheel along. It looked like a ton of fun to me. I'd probably abuse it. That's why they don't have them. But stores were tall. The Hill, I look at Amy Johnson and others of you who grew up on the Hill. Those stores up there, that's a weird one to me. The Hill generally developed in the 1960s. There were obviously some places up there, but never a grocery store up there. And I started thinking, well, why would that be? Wouldn't that be a great opportunity? And the fact is, by the 1960s, most moms had their own car and were driving. So let's have a peek at some neighborhood stores. There's Arndt's. Arndt's is on 7th North and Jefferson, and really kind of, we used the term a complete store before. This might qualify because once you did your grocery shopping, you go to the bar next door. That seems like a complete store. That's all I need. This is the Guth Family, G-U-T-H, and they are doing it out of the front of their house. There's their house. They lived on 7th North and German Street. This might be the parking lot to the credit union today. But look at that. You wouldn't look at that and go, oh, that's a store. Well, they made it work. Nippy's, before that, Mark Vanguard had a little convenience store on 9th North and Broadway. That was kind of mine. And my parents, we lived at 122 North Washington until 1965, went to Nuns. Then we moved to 811 North Franklin, where my mom still is, and that was our neighborhood store. Then Vedder's. Vedder's, this is 5th North and State Street. That's Smiley's Bar today. But what do you see under the E and T? A gas pump. You might call that, and the next few I'm going to show you, as early convenience stores. I mean, that you would truly get their main business is selling you groceries, but you could get your car filled up. And that gas pump was there till the 60s. Us kids would walk to Holy Trinity, and the gas pump was there in the 60s yet, I can tell you that. I never recall seeing anybody use it, so maybe it just costs too much to take down. Here's Tauschik's on 6th North and 6th South in Minnesota. Did you know it was Strati and Tauschik's at one time? It became Lenore's before it finally got out of the corner grocery store with gas pump in the front. This is Dohmeyer's German store. Look, before she added on to the front, prominently with the gas pump. But these stores were out in the neighborhoods where the people were. This is the Byers store. It was across from the train depot. Next to it was the Northwestern Hotel. It's since been torn down, sadly, but you know, little. Look at how the size of a grocery store, and a liquor store of sorts too. The Trauerig's grocery store was on 4th South in Minnesota. My grandpa, my mom's dad, I never met my grandpa. He died when my mom was only 9. And yet there's people who say, so how come you never... I said my mom was 9 when he died. How could I be born with my mom being 9? You're not thinking very clearly. Trauerig's, it's now a parking lot for St. Mary's Church, but it had a gas station as well. Yeah, my grandpa was working there and he got robbed. Got the newspaper article, he's had to lay flat and not get up till he counted to 100 or something like that. That's Sam Traurig, or Leopold, but they called him Sam. And then Southsiders, Tony, where's this?
Walleye.
Yeah, the Walner's Walleye grocery store at, was it 1127 South Franklin? Something like that. But the thing to me, he made a living out of this little front part to his house. The scale is just so amazing to me at these little stores. So big changes happened in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And those changes were primarily in the food preservation aspect. Prior to that, people would can their food. My wife, my mom. Oh, wait, let's look at some little grocery stores first. I don't know the names of this store, but...
That's Beer Bomb Grocery.
Which one?
That's Beer Bomb Grocery.
Beer Bomb, okay, good. Thank you. I'm doing a show tonight, I'll use it.
My grandmother.
Ah, well, there you go. But look at the point of you're working with your clerk, not a self-service store. You're working with this man. I actually, if I was sharp, I would have gotten an apron to wear for the presentation. But look at everything's behind him, way up high. He needs his grabber, and he's a professional. This is a big deal. He's wearing a suit and tie. He is taking this very serious, and everything's behind counters. He's going to handle your thing for him. You give him the list.
And the other man?
This is a mannequin, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's Joe Groundrider.
Oh, really?
He took over the stores for some time, I don't know how long, after
Oh, very good. Oh, I love learning stuff. Talk about provisions and groceries or other things in groceries. Look at this. It's got baskets and blankets and towels, and also this looks like it's fabric for sewing and such. But they also had food in there. So that's your provision store with, you know which one that was? I don't. And then this one too. Again, talk about how tall is it. The average 5.5-foot lady can't reach the stuff up on the top shelf. He's going to do it for you. They're going to do it for you. But the professionalism of them too. So a different experience. You're going to meet these guys every day, and you're going to get to know those folks. So we talked about food preservation. So canning. My mom canned. I bet many of you guys did. Even my wife canned when we were first married. You'd use your cellar, which was usually colder. You would salt food. We've all heard of that. You could dry it, dried meats and such. Another thing we used was smoking meats primarily. This is just a recent picture. It's at what I would call the Fleck family. It's not the Flecks living there anymore, but it's on 4th South and Valley Street, smokehouse. And the other one that I know of is Bill Hevelman's on 3rd, I said 4th South, 4th North and Valley. This is 3rd South and German Street. People have said it's an outhouse. No, it's a smokehouse. You ain't gonna build an outhouse that strong. What are you doing in there that needs all that strength? So people, you couldn't tip it over, right? People bought more fresh produce than we did probably, because they didn't have a place to store it, to keep it. So you'd go every day. One of the reasons you went every day was that.
I don't think they had fresh though, did they?
As fresh as you could get it. Trains are here. Trains are coming. We had roads. Roads were here from the beginning of New Ulm's founding. People think we had no roads. So, here, we talked about New Ulm Ice Company. Again, my wife is from Wells, where they have no water around them. But we have the river. This is not shot in New Ulm. This is a generic ice harvesting picture. But guys would go down in winter. How many fell in? You have to guess it happened. I don't know that. But you have to admit some guys would fall in. But they'd cut the ice into various size blocks, haul it up to their house, and then on a delivery route that had been established, you'd take it to the individuals' homes. So here's the delivery guy. He's got a big leather apron over his shoulders. I'm sure those little kids, it's summer and they want a little chunk of ice to suck on. I imagine that's what that's about. He had his ice in here. He just delivered it to the ice box. My mom, and maybe some of you did this too, would always call our refrigerator an ice box. And we're all going, "Mom, not an ice box. Why are you calling it that?" Well, when she was young, it was an ice box. And so I'll tell you this little story. I interviewed Colette and Stuart Grebner, and they had a really cool thing to say. Colette said, when we were first married, we lived with my mom and dad. And they had in their brick house on the side a hole cut into the bricks with a door on it. And then inside was a sliding door. And the iceman, instead of traipsing through, especially in summer, dripping ice everywhere, dripping water everywhere, he'd just come, open that, and shove his ice block right into the ice box. It was all lined up perfectly to fit. Pretty clever, pretty high tech there. The only ice house I know of there's a remnant of. We had a few. I can't give you much detail on them, but I know we had more than just the one. This was what I would call the Gog Sheet Metal Building. It was 3rd North and Valley Street. And that is a huge, strongly built building. I talked to a guy named Jerry. Oh gosh, what's Jerry's last name? He worked for Windings. Jerry Kaufman, exactly. Our kids were friends, and so I knew him. And I'm telling him about this, and he says, yeah, Windings used to own this. And he said, oh, you should go inside and see it. He said, it's really cool because there's another thick set of walls, in a second set inside there, have about a foot gap between the walls, and you fill it with sawdust or straw as insulation. Because theoretically, that ice you cut in winter has to last you until the next winter freezes your water source over again. So, but just here's a pic. Look at how thick that wall is. That's just a picture taken from the outside of the building. And there again, showing you how strongly built that was. It's got to keep that ice as cold as possible. Oh, no, you didn't see that. So I talked about other changes. Refrigerators came. Refrigerators came and had reached what, again, we call a crucial mass by the 1930s. So most everybody, there's always exceptions, but most everybody had a refrigerator by the 1930s. They didn't have freezers yet. Freezers didn't come till about 10 years later. You may have seen, maybe some of you lived with it, I did not, but you've seen those freezer units on top of the refrigerator too. Would freeze it and cool it. And those came in the 1940s. But that was a change. You no longer had to go at least get a lot of meat and frozen things every day, because you can now store it at home in your own refrigerator. That's a big change. That's a big change. You go perhaps weekly. You may need to get some milk and bread, but you could send your oldest kid to do that. So Charles Birdseye comes out in 1929 with frozen vegetables and other things, which we think, well, what's the big deal about that? Didn't exist before that. There was no such thing as this sort of thing. If you wanted to have frozen vegetables, you bought your own vegetables, cut them up, put them in something, and then you froze them at home, or more likely you would have canned them. To have frozen vegetables was a big deal. Semi-fresh vegetable and fruit now. Who the heck are those people? That's my grandma Marie Sweeney and my grandpa George Sweeney, George Sr. And why I'm showing you pictures. And now we'll progress into the Sweeney family history. Grandma and Grandpa have a cute story. My dad's number 12 of 15 kids. All of them moved away except us. So our rare name that we don't even pronounce right comes from them. When they moved from Hanska to New Ulm, the Germans wanted to pronounce our name Swine. We don't want to do this. With 15 kids, you got 15 piglets. No, we don't want that. So we end up saying Sweeney like it's Irish, and it's not spelled that way or anything. It's weird. Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. But why do I show their picture? Grandma lived to be 95, and she was sound of mind and body. And I'm maybe like a 20-year-old now. And we were very close. We lived just a couple blocks from Grandma and Grandpa, and we were quite close to them. We really liked them. She was a great gal. And I went up to Grandma had then left her home and moved to the top floor of the hospital, which was a nursing home at that time. And I said, Grandma, you were born in 1889. You have seen a ton of changes. You know, railroads have come. Electricity is in big cities and starting to be hung in the country. You saw World War I. You've seen the automobile. You've seen radio and television. World War II. You've seen man on the moon. Grandma, you've seen a ton of change in your lifetime. What stood out to you as the biggest change? And she thought a little bit, and she said, plastic. Well, to me, plastic is cheap, crappy stuff that we got away from quality metal and that, and plastic's everywhere. Plastic, Grandma? No, man on the moon, think big, think big. She said, Terry, no, plastic. Well, Grandma, I don't get it. Why would you say something like that? Food preservation. 15 kids, they never ate. My dad and his siblings never ate at once. The house wasn't big enough. You'd eat in shifts. They had 3 shifts of who would eat. And so Tupperware and baggies was the biggest thing in Grandma Sweeney's life. And it makes sense when you understand why she said that. And that's true. I bet many of your grandmas or parents would have had about the same thing to say. So a huge change happens in New Ulm in 1943. The A&P store comes, and look what it is. It's a self-service store. A&P is on Center and Minnesota Street.
What year was that?
This is in 1943. A&P is huge. It's a national chain. It's Atlantic and Pacific Company. It started before the Civil War. They were all over. They were the biggest retailer in the United States in their day. And we got a branch. It's like us getting a Target store. Same impact. How come we got these all over and we don't have one? Oh, we finally got one. And the same with that. Well, we finally got an A&P store. But what does it do? They start carrying much more selections. It's self-service. You're not going to have 500 of these in the store you give out to every customer that comes in. It meant that your presentation of your goods had to be lower. You had to be able to reach it. So stores shrunk in height, which meant they were carrying more. It had to spread in width. So stores got much bigger. And this starts now. It didn't categorically end the neighborhood grocery stores, but it's starting to affect them more. After the A&P store, then Piggly Wiggly took that over. Now you can more clearly see Minnesota and Center Streets. And then Jenkins. Remember, and some of you New Ulm folks would remember Jenkins. Jenkins came in 1953. And they are not a grocery store. They're a supermarket. Yet they want to have that small town feel, the little neighborhood store. Hi, neighbor. Yeah, shut up. This is just, you don't care. So this would have been located, it's a parking lot of AMPI today, if you can imagine that. On the corner, the taller building was Lampert Lumber, and then, which now today is just an open corner, and then the parking lot of AMPI, but then this was these guys. One thing that these bigger stores offered were promotions. I mean, they could stay open longer. You're hiring people now. It's not just you and your wife or whatever doing it. You can hire people to run your store. You keep longer hours. You can do promotions that the little guys can't do. And here's an example of the promotions. Aunt Jemima was going to be in person to show you how to make pancakes. Now, we laugh at that, but I'm going to make a statement. It's unprovable, so I can get away with saying it. She's probably the first black person that most people in New Ulm saw. Unless you were a soldier who had been in the war, you probably, if you lived in New Ulm, you didn't see a whole lot of black people, right? So she very likely was the first one. Another thing that bigger stores could do that little stores couldn't was this, gold bond stamps. I love this. When I gave it a year and a half ago, it's like you reach an old time. Oh, now they were alive. They remember it here. Kurt Carlson, who builds the Radisson Hotel chain, got his start owning the gold bond business. And then Speary and Hutchinson, S&H Green Stamps. Even I can remember this. You would fill up your little booklet, and then you had to go to downtown Mankato to cash it in. I remember many times going and come back with a new toaster or something like that. Again, silly things to us, passe, somewhat meaningless things, but big changes. Little grocery stores can't afford to do it. Because S&H is not just giving these stamps away. They have no way to, how are they making money? They're selling them to the grocer, who then is turning around and giving them away as a premium. Remember other things, though. We owned, like I bet half of you here, you owned an encyclopedia set you got as a premium from the grocery store. Dishes, plates and glasses, sometimes silverware, all of these other things that big stores could afford to give away as inducements. It also meant these bigger stores are now cutting into what I'm calling ancillary food businesses, not grocery stores, but stores that dealt with food, like Current's Food Locker, the 100 block of North State Street, Steve Shriver's investment business today. Those things, now these big stores are having in-house butcher shops, in-house dairy stores, in-house bakeries. It's really cutting into this type of a business in a big way. We're lucky to still have the wonderful bakery we do. That is kind of an anomaly. Most towns don't have that anymore, at least of comparable size. Rosa Snowbrook City Meat Market on Center and Minnesota Street. That cut into her business. My grandma Schmitz lived upstairs here. And I'd love to go down and watch them. I'd like to go down when they brought the farmers brought the cows in the back, because they butcher them in the basement. Every once in a while you'd see a random cow running down the streets of Minnesota Street. They'd get all freaked out and they'd run out. Even when I worked at the chamber, we'd see the stray deer. What is a deer doing at Center Minnesota Street? No, I'm getting set up one early morning in winter when it's still dark out, and boom, this deer runs right into the glass window and probably broke a tooth or two.
Terry,
Yes.
they used to go ahead and have the high school kids go and watch them kill.
Is that right?
Yes, kill their animals.
Ah.
So I don't know when they quit that.
I know, one of my good friends and classmates worked there in high school, so it would have been the late 90s and early 70s. So it was still going on then. Steve would talk about animals getting loose too. Lenny Donahue is a bit of an anomaly. He made his standalone sausage shop on 3rd North and Broadway still worked, but how clever of Lenny to lure the visitor center to be there, to get out-of-town people who are going to come in. And by the way, we got some great food here. Saffron Meat Market. Barb, related to you guys? No? You can see Weigel's Kaiserhof sign here. So for those that don't know, it's what I call the south half of the Kaiserhof today, but it was Saffron's Meat Market for many years. Inside picture from about, we think, the 1930s. This is Mr. Andrew Saffron here. So the middle thing, first of all, look at the butchers are wearing white shirts and ties, bow ties or long ties. They didn't want to handle money. Money's dirty, so you come and pay your bill to this lady. As a little kid, did anybody else get freaked out by the buffalo head up here? Mom would take me in there when I'm 6 or something. It's like, what? Is the rest of them behind the wall or what? I had never seen a stuffed animal before, and this big buffalo head was just drove me crazy to go in there. Another kind of a fun picture. You see Kaiserhof Moore and Saffron's. And Nick's Custom Tailoring. This came down in about 1968. I call it today the parking lot for the Kaiserhof, if you can get your bearings as to where we are. And by the cars there, oh, that's 1950s. Yeah, I don't see a 60s. Then, Madsen's. Madsen's, which is today's AMPI headquarters, just down the street 3 blocks, the 300 block of North Broadway. Madsen's was a big change. And you start seeing ads for these bigger stores. Jenkins gave way to Madsen's. Earl Madsen from Mankato bought him out, actually tore his building down, enlarged his parking lot, and built a whole new building there. But you start seeing ads, plenty of parking. Well, that tells you a world of difference. Nobody going to the neighborhood grocery store at George Reiser's old place worries about parking. It's just not how it was. Now the ads are, we're a supermarket, we're open Sundays, and we've got plenty of parking, and that tells you a lot. One of the biggest social changes, now driving even further change, happened in the 1950s. The 1950s, by then, most people had a TV. And what's that TV doing? It's telling you that your life is not near good enough. You need to see the USA in your Chevrolet. And you've got to buy a new washing and dryer machine, because then you'll be happy if you have that. And on, all the products that you needed to have to make a good life. TV it's right in your living room, in color, telling you. Although we didn't have a color TV till I was a senior in high school. And imagine my shock when I learned that the Wizard of Oz turned into color when she landed in. What's this now? What's this? But it was a big change. So, Madsen's built a second store. I remember going in this, so I'm one of the younger ones here. This is today's Quick Trip. You can see the building. Yeah, it was, so Madsen's opened a second store. It was kind of a discount store, as I remember as a young guy, kind of buying more in bulk. But it could serve as a regular grocery store as well. And then they sold it to Paul Slaybaugh at Paul's Super Value. Anybody remember Ida's Cafe?
Oh, yeah.
They moved across the street, but for a while they were right there. So it's a fun little picture. Stan Frecking opened his Red Owl and enlarged his Red Owl substantially. Tore down the houses on the corner, just as I'm pointing here where the bank is now, and you got to have the parking. Parking is a huge deal. This picture of Swanson's, which came to New Ulm in 1965, and is today the Riverbend Alternative School. So 65 that came. But look at what this is. This sums up the big change. The fact is, you're on Broadway here. All you're seeing is a parking lot with cars on it, and a big parking lot, half a block, a quarter block parking lot. Oh, there's the store too. So that sums up dramatically how things changed. It was during the 60s when frozen foods, TV dinners, instant cakes, all of that sort of thing came out. Because the change that drove that was, yes, TV telling you, you need all this stuff to be happy. Well, how am I gonna afford that? Moms went to work. Huge statistics. Look, 1950s working mothers, 8%. 1960s working mothers, 42%. It rose dramatically. In fact, I will venture to say it's in the top 5 of all of the changes that drove in the grocery world, and other things as well. But it was moms going to work. Mom all of a sudden doesn't have 40 hours a week of discretionary time. Now, I'm not telling you taking care of kids isn't work. because for the last half year, I've been taking care of my little now 10-month-old grandson. And there's a reason you have kids in your 20s and 30s. But mom could control her time, even with raising the big family. She could walk to the neighborhood grocery store and all that. Well, mom's also now, if she's working, she needs a second car. And my mom went to work in my memory in 1967. And then we got a second car. Prior to that, when Dad would come home, my dad was a machinist with Noah Manufacturing. He'd come home at 11:30 to eat. If Mom needed a car, she'd drive him back down to the shop and have the car in the afternoon. Now she's got her own car. So it also means you got less socializing. Who are you going to talk? Who do you know in Swanson's, and pick the name of the grocery store you want? Who do you know in there that you're going to talk to? Oh, maybe a neighbor has a part-time job, but you don't know nobody owns these things anymore. They're all managers. The owners, as a beer bomb and et cetera, where that family owned it, and sometimes for generations, that's gone. Nobody owns these stores. They're all managers. So you don't have time to socialize. You don't know the people in there. The scale of what you're doing is much bigger. In the 1940s, Saffron's Meat Market ran ads that said, where you buy quality. You'll never see these guys making ads like that. That's not what they're about. Joel's grocery store said, at your service with a smile. It's not what advertising is anymore. Even in the 70s, you might remember Hy-Vee's, where there's a helpful smile in every aisle. That went away, and their new slogan at the time was more ways to save, more reasons to smile. That's a whole different message. So grocery shopping went from something you wanted to do because it was fun. You're going to see your grocer who you know and like and have a relationship with, to now something you have to do. It's become more of a function. So Jenkins, then Madsen's, these are the big drivers. So this lady, I have to believe that no woman dressed like this to go to the meat market. Come on. But the point of the one-on-one service is what I want to make with that picture there. That is not the way it is anymore. But I would contend that little neighborhood stores are around, sort of. Today we call them, I'm ahead of myself. Well, hold on to that. So we talked about the cereal that your grocer would pull off the top shelf and give you. This is Lori Otis, who was the president of the Junior Pioneers when I first did this. I posed her to do this. I went out to Cashwise and measured the cereal aisle, only the cereal aisle. When previously you would have gotten one brand of cereal. Now the cereal aisle alone is 76 feet long. It's 7 feet high, and you had a choice of 225 types of cereal. We have become such babies, Oh, I don't like it. It's not toasted, and I wish it had raisins. Shut up and just buy some cereal, for the gods. But they have allowed us to be so. They give us this, and so we come to expect that. So I talked about neighborhood grocery stores not being around. I contend they still are, sort of. So this is Quick Trip. Quick Trip's in business to sell you gas. But as long as you're in there, they're going to sell you other stuff. And look, they've even got departments, a dairy department, an egg department, fresh fruit. So things that have changed are still around in a different manner. So that's the main part of the talk. I'm going to talk about I interviewed 4 either singles or couples, and I learned a lot from them. So I interviewed Stuart and Colette Grebner. I talked about that neat grocery icebox thing her parents had. And they both agreed that Stuart said yes, and mother would go shopping daily. He meant his wife. It kills me when spouses call each other mother and dad. No, that's too weird to me. But anyway, you see, yeah, mother would go shopping daily, and Colette said, yeah, I did, but I used the neighborhood stores. She'd go down to Nippy's, where she lived. It's just 3 blocks away. And so they were very nice people. Stuart said, yeah, probably more selection. Maybe even cheaper downtown, but the convenience aspect went out. I think Colette had 5 or 6 kids, I believe. So I interviewed my mother, Lois Sweeney. My mom worked at Madsen's from 1972 as it morphed into Randall's and retired in 1995. Ma started out as a cashier but went into work in the office more. But she said a lot of little changes happened in that time to make my cashier job even easier. The little conveyor belts that now bring the groceries up to the checkout lady. That wasn't there. I even remember you'd put it on a shelf and you'd have to push it up to the cashier. Electronic cash registers. Instead of pushing a button, a hard button, now you just tap this little electronic one. It's simply done. You go, how tough is life when doing this? Well, do it all day. Do it for 8 hours a day. That probably, in the old days, would have made for sore hands. She praised her bag boys. If you remember, Randall's system was you could carry your bag of groceries or two out to the car yourself. They had a whole block of parking lot, which kills me. But you could put it in a blue box, a blue bin with a number, and you pull your car around. And this happened all year round. Ma praised her bag boys. They're out there in blizzards and rainstorms and everything, putting the groceries in your car. What a change that is from years ago. Then Ma said, scanners, when the scanners came out, she said, that was a big change. Remember? There'd always be this grocery store employee, and he'd have a little, like a gun on his side belt here, and he'd have a big box of corn, and he's going, putting individual price tags on them. Well, the barcode thing comes out. You don't need to do that anymore. Until the electricity goes out in the grocery store. It's not very cool then. She thought about 3 times in the first year and a half of Randall's opening with the barcodes that the electricity went out. Nobody knows what anything costs anymore. So they just leave all of your groceries where they are and exit the building, please. We can't check you out. We don't know what anything costs. Now, it's been perfected, but it was what started out good. It had some snags, to be sure. Well, I then interviewed Leo Jr. in Clareburg. Leo Jr.'s dad, Leo Sr., had grocery stores around town. He primarily in the basement of Herberger's, if any of you remember that. They wanted to create, Leo said his dad wanted to create a family feel. They would work with their employees. The employees would come over to the Berg house and eat supper with them. The Bergs lived on First North and Franklin Street. Neat big brick house. They go on family vacations, typically up to Painesville. But inevitably, Leo Sr. would get a call. There's an emergency at the grocery store, and he'd have to go home and cut short his vacation. He'd stay here for a few days, too. They had bulk candy. My mom, who lived above that building, I grew up there. She said, they always had barrels of crackers and barrels of candy and what else? Sauerkraut. You'd take a pinch of sauerkraut as you go by. OSHA laws would probably prevent much of that from these days here. They were the first ones to have the bird's eye frozen food. That was a big deal for them. Leo Jr. said, we ate a variety of fruit and vegetable, probably more than most people did, but it wasn't the good stuff. And he said, I'll prove to you that we ate this, but it wasn't the good stuff. He said, I didn't know that bananas didn't have black spots on them until I was an adult. And then egg candling. It's something I was aware of but never saw in my lifetime. Egg candling, for those of you that don't know, was you'd have contracts with farmers who would bring in fresh eggs every day. And there was some sort of conveyor belt. If I'm Leo Jr., for example, I'm looking, there's a very bright light here. The eggs are being transported. Okay, good, liquid egg. Oh, a chick, we can't sell that one. Just set it aside. And so egg candling was something they did. And then, remember we talked about the cash and carry concept. Well, in World War II, that happened. One family, and Leo didn't tell me the name. He said, actually, I don't remember the name, I'd tell you. But he said one family had the dad and 2 sons in World War II for 3 years. And she said they had charged up over $10,000. In the 1940s, that was a lot of money. That was a very lot of money. That's probably the size of, or the amount of a house. My parents bought the house we live in now for $16,000 in 1966, so probably was enough for a house. And I said, well, why would you? And Leo Jr. said, we probably would have failed if they would have never paid us back fairly quickly. But in fact, they did pay them back. But I said, so why would your dad do that? And he said, somebody had to take care of that family. So hats off to Leo Berg Sr. for being a nice guy, that's for sure. They would also, Leo and his brother Dick would deliver groceries. Deliveries of grocery stores, and we saw that one-horse grocery store in 1870, they would deliver. Well, deliveries have come and gone throughout New Ulm's history, and I decided I'm not going to track that. That's a whole big effort story, but just know that it came and went. But in the 40s and 50s, Leo's Market was doing it. And he said, we'd just take what they ordered and we'd drive it up to their house. The house would be unlocked. We'd put the stuff on the table and then the things that needed to go in the freezer, refrigerator in there. And I'm thinking, who's going to let some ratty grocery store kid into your house to put your milk and butter away? I'm not. But perhaps it was a different time. They closed when Jenkins came to town. Jenkins, remember, in 1943. So, the last couple I interviewed was Stan and Betty Frecking. They owned the Red Owl grocery store. Would have been where the bank is across the street here today. They did have it in other locations, but that's where it ended. Betty said, "Oh, we work long hours." Stan was at the store 7 in the morning to 10 at night. And Stan's going, "I was not there that long, Mother." Here's that mother-father thing. and Betty says, "Well, Stan, remember our son?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "Well, you got to tell me what the son story is." One of their boys had a girlfriend. He was over at the girlfriend's house eating supper. And the dad of that family came and sat at the table with them. And the freaking kid is going, "Well, what is it, a holiday? What's happening here?" He had not seen his dad eat supper with them. That seeing in somebody else's house was a big deal to him. It was confusing. So I guess Stan freaking did work long hours.
Stan Frecking's wife's name is Marge.
Not Betty?
Stan Frecking's wife's name is Marge.
Yeah, not Betty.
Not Betty.
All right. Marge. All right. Thank you. Marge. Marge said they ate many mystery meals. I said, "Well, you got to tell me what a mystery meal is. I've never heard of that." She says, "We own the groceries in our store. We own everything in our store. Family feel with their employees and customers, and they were closed on holidays. That's family time." And so Stan said, "But like every year I would get calls at Thanksgiving. 'Stan, I got 20 people at the house. Can you open the store?' And so Stan would go down just for that customer. And what are the 2 things that he said that I sold the most of? Cool Whip and cranberry sauce." Yeah. The family then sold out to Country Store in 1987, which is today's Cashwise, but they didn't make a go of that. Stan ended up working at Cashwise for a while. So they were fun. Those were fun people to interview. So I've got my summary for you here, and then we are on our... Oh, Terry, you went a little long. Well. Grocery shopping was formerly a household duty done nearly daily by the family's mother. The early grocery stores were concentrated in the central business district or the downtown. Most early grocery stores were diversified and carried a wide variety of other goods besides just groceries. Due to the frequency and slower pace of the shopping experience, it included socializing aspects and personal relationships developed between the grocer and their customers. Selection was limited, but that seemed fine with most people. As New Ulm grew in the early 1900s with few travel options for most mothers, the neighborhood stores developed outside of the downtown. Food preservation techniques in the early 1900s, such as home refrigerators and freezers, changed the frequency of shopping and diminished the social aspect of that experience. Chain stores and national brands appeared around 1940 and caused an increase in selection, which demanded that stores got bigger and therefore less personal. Mothers going to work en masse in the 1960s caused a vast decrease in their discretionary time, and they wanted and needed a one-stop shop. The one-stop shop concept meant consolidating ancillary stores into a supermarket with in-house bakeries, frozen food lockers, dairy stores, and butcher shops in the supermarket. With many families, this is a big one here that I hadn't considered till I did this work. With many families then having 2 cars, grocery stores needed to move out of the downtown for the newer, bigger stores and the necessary parking lots to the edge of town. This changed the vitality of downtown tremendously. If instead of everybody in town going downtown at least once a week, if not more frequently, to the grocery store of your selection, and the grocery stores aren't there anymore, you now go out there, it was a kick in the backside to downtown's vitality in a big way. And it happened in our lifetimes. Today's grocery shopping experience, despite efforts to restore perceptions of customer service and to give a more personalized experience, is based on a wide selection of products, low prices, expected multiple other services, and the efficiency and quickness of the shopping experience. It's now something you have to do instead of wanting to do. So it appears that the quaintness of yesteryear's grocery shopping experience that most of us knew is over and will not be returning. However, my sons are 30 and 31, I asked them. To most younger New Ulmites, it's something they never knew and therefore don't miss. You don't see a bunch of 30-year-olds in here. First of all, they're working, but this would not have made much sense to them. They didn't experience anything like this. So like it or not, as this picture I'm about to show you says, a return to the good old days may not be something we'd all want, though. The reason these things all exist is because they get supported by us. It may be that we don't have many other choices, but we all buy into it. And so it's a different story than this guy here. When I was a boy, my mama would send me down to the corner store with $1. I'd come back with 5 potatoes, 2 loaves of bread, 3 bottles of milk, a hunk of cheese, a box of tea, and 6 eggs. You can't do that now. There's too many security cameras. So that's all I've got for you folks. Thank you. I'm going to hang around. Some of you inevitably are going to ask me, Terry, did you ever run into such and such a grocery store? Yes, I did. I got a list of all the ones I ever found for this essay 15 years ago. So thank you, folks.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. That was fantastic. A couple more things. I'm just going to reiterate what Kathleen said earlier as far as up and coming events for us. We do have Minnesota Headline Murders coming up for Lunch and a Bite on June 3rd, Thursday from noon to 1. Again, we do have capacity, or we have capacity limits, so sign up in advance. There is a sign-in sheet back here, so you guys can get in on that. Also the schoolhouse posting, that's going to be, if you have any young ones who might be interested in doing a day in the life of a Pioneer School child, that's coming up. It's a Tuesday or Thursday, the 22nd or the 24th of June in the morning. Also, the Kiesling House will be opening for the season on June 6th, and we will run on weekends from 1 to 4, Saturday and Sunday. Other thing, Popcorn Wagon will be coming, open again, and the schedule is pending. So, with that, thank you again so much for coming today, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right.